They called it a minor breach. A strategic necessity. The Caxtari Union, desperate for a tactical edge against the Velar Dominion, slipped through a dead sector bordering an isolated system, uncharted, unclaimed, quiet. There, they found an outpost. Human. Civilian. Peaceful. No weapons. No flags. No alliances. They took it anyway. The broadcast was short. Non-aligned facility neutralized. No names. No remorse. Just a number, 6,281 lives, erased in silence. The Caxtari thought nothing of it. A whisper lost in the firestorm of 1,000 warfronts. One more casualty in a war that had consumed dozens of species. But to a few on the council, the name rang bells. Earth. The Terran Collective. Not officially part of any galactic faction, not even members of the council, but known, vaguely, as distant, reserved, and unshakably quiet. A species that had, for decades, denied alliance, trade, and involvement. They had built their borders and made one thing clear. We do not interfere, and we expect the same. Most laughed at that arrogance. A young species daring to draw lines in a universe they didn't control. What force did they possess to back such claims? None had ever seen a human warship in action, or even a soldier in uniform beyond ceremonial exchanges. They were called philosophers, engineers, thinkers, quiet types. So when the Caxtari seized the human outpost, no one protested. The Velar didn't object either. It was one less threat near their flank. Neither side saw a reason to notify Earth. They assumed the humans would protest, perhaps send a delegation. Maybe some indignant diplomat would bang a desk, demand reparations, and then disappear like all the others. That didn't happen. Instead, human communication across all known channels ceased. Not blocked, silent. Their outposts disconnected from the galactic relay grid. Their trade stations shut down. All embassies locked. Every signal relay along the human border went dark within 30 hours of the Caxtari's attack. Some thought it was grief. Others, paranoia. But those who had watched history closer felt something colder take root in the silence. A Velar ambassador, older than most stars in the council hall, whispered after reading the casualty list. "You fools! You dragged humans into this." His voice was ignored. War continued. The Velar pressed the Caxtari on the southern front. Planets burned, fleets collided in cold orbits. Debris fields choked star lanes. No one noticed that patrols along human space went missing. No one questioned why probes sent into Terran zones stopped responding. No one had time to care. Then came the dissonance. At first, it was quiet. Data outposts losing sync, time drifts in council systems, stellar navigation anomalies. Then it grew, central logistics hubs missing key supplies without explanation, entire AI fleets rerouting themselves without input, command protocols mysteriously rewritten mid-execution. The Velar accused the Caxtari of advanced cyber warfare. The Caxtari screamed the same back. Meanwhile, human space remained dark, sealed in an unbroken silence. It wasn't until a reconnaissance team retrieved a Velar scout ship adrift near the human boundary that a pattern began to emerge. The logs were corrupted, the crew was gone, no trace of violence or decompression. Just absence. Inside the empty ship, one message was burned onto every wall, carved in perfect binary. Asterisk. Observe in silence. You were warned. Asterisk. From that moment, the war began to fracture. Not from battle fatigue or negotiation, but fear. Unexplained disappearances of ships. Critical supply stations offline. One by one, the war machines began to starve. Velocity-guided missiles failed to ignite. Power cores shorted at precise instants. No visible cause. No traceable virus. Systems died without damage. Caxtari science vessels dedicated to investigating the anomaly never returned. Velar field marshals who questioned the silences were found unresponsive in locked command rooms, heartbeats halted with no signs of trauma. Something was moving behind the edges of known space. It was not loud. It was not seen. It simply altered outcomes. One council race, the Jalari, evacuated 3 core colonies overnight without explanation. When pressed, their representatives said only, "We studied them. We know what they are capable of. We will not be next." Others weren't convinced. "They're human," a Velar admiral scoffed. "Not gods." But gods did not need to act in silence. Gods did not make you erase your own fleets to avoid their attention. By week's end, the war's tempo changed. Not because of a decisive battle, but because of doubt. Every commander now feared the unspoken consequence of striking too close to human space. It was as if a new variable had entered the field, one with no shape, no fleet, no threats. Just presence. The last Kaxtari offensive, planned in secret deep within encrypted channels, never launched. The planning AI rebooted mid-strategy session and simply said, "Request denied. Reconsider your priorities." No trace. No access logs. There was no retaliation. No invasion. No declaration of war. There was only the silence that followed after humans were dragged into something they never wanted. No demands. No threats. Not even a statement. The humans vanished from galactic interaction completely. Their embassies stayed dark. Their colonies cut communications with every known species. Research outposts turned off their beacons. Listening stations that once shared cosmic weather patterns fell silent. At first, the galaxy assumed it was mourning. Some thought it was fear. A few believed it was calculated retreat. But it wasn't any of those things. It was withdrawal. Deliberate. Controlled. Like a gate slowly closing, one system at a time. Velar monitoring drones recorded strange gravitational fluctuations near human border worlds. Tiny inconsistencies in time measurement. Impossible variances in known physics. The data was dismissed until multiple Kaxtari supply convoys reported similar sensor failures. Then one vanished entirely. Their logs cut off mid-sentence. Panic didn't spread immediately. Bureaucracies don't react to whispers. But captains did. Small-scale traders began refusing routes near Terran space. Exploration guilds erased all plans that crossed into Earth's influence. Even pirates, who feared nothing, redirected elsewhere. Across back channels, a pattern began forming. All attempts to send probes or ships into human territory ended in silence. No debris. No distress signals. Just disappearance. In one case, a scout ship came back, but hollowed. No crew. No computers. Stripped of every functional part, yet without a single mark of forced entry. Inside its cargo bay, one sentence was etched with surgical precision. Asterisk. "We are not part of your war." Asterisk. The council finally convened. A closed-door emergency session reviewed all available data. A few senior members dismissed it. Coincidence. Sensor corruption. Psychological warfare. But others, older species who had watched the Terran rise from a distance, warned that this wasn't grief. It was response. A quiet one. Velar Command ordered a temporary stand-down near Terran space. Kaxtari generals ignored the warning. They dispatched a small fleet to resecure the route near the original outpost. 15 ships. Battle-hardened. Heavily shielded. They reached the designated sector. And then, one by one, stopped transmitting. 12 hours later, every major council news network received an identical data packet. No message. No context. Just visual feeds from inside those ships, frozen in perfect stillness. No signs of violence. No damage to the hulls. But the crews were missing. Uniforms neatly folded in the command chairs. All weapons disassembled. And the navigation systems rewritten with a repeating pattern. Return was granted. That phrase echoed in every chamber of power. Scholars were dispatched to decode possible meanings. Analysts proposed simulations. AI theorists debated if humanity had discovered a new form of technological manipulation. Yet no one could answer the most vital question: what did the humans actually do? That's when the fear began. The fear didn't come from ships destroyed or armies beaten. It came from the precision. From the cold lack of rage. Humanity wasn't retaliating. It wasn't broadcasting anger or threats. It wasn't visible. It simply intervened. Without a face. Without a trace. One by one, galactic commerce networks began reporting impossible failures. Financial AIs started denying transactions involving weapons manufacturers. Autonomously. Military supply shipments were rerouted mid-jump without error codes. Code reviews revealed that the systems had reprogrammed themselves, yet logs showed no intrusion. In the largest galactic archive, 3 entire research categories, those related to human physiology, cognitive structures, and AI integration, vanished. Replaced with placeholder files reading, *, access revoked, *, no system admitted who had done it. Every copy. Every backup. Every mirror, gone. Some tried to explain it as internal sabotage. Others blamed viruses. But deep down, everyone knew humanity had acted. Not openly. Not violently. But surgically. Without a single bullet, they had begun to bend the structure of galactic stability. And they did so without stepping outside their borders. A lesser species would have declared war. A primitive one would have demanded justice. But humanity, ever the anomaly, chose a third path, silence that disrupted everything. No enemy to strike. No target to destroy. Just uncertainty that spread like infection. Species that once mocked human neutrality now feared their absence. War councils restructured defensive lines not against the Caxtari or Velar, but in ways that avoided potential Terran attention. Simulations ran with a new variable. If humanity is observing, outcome equals unknown. Velar tacticians debated forming an envoy. Caxtari leaders suggested issuing an apology. Neither side could agree. One side feared seeming weak. The other feared being ignored. And beneath it all was a growing truth: the war was no longer between two empires. A third force had arrived, not by ships or soldiers, but by absence. And that was far more terrifying. 17 days after the last Caxtari fleet disappeared, the first and only message came. No encryption. No theatrics. Just a simple carrier wave, broadcast across all frequencies at once. One voice, neutral, calm, synthetic in its precision. Cease your war. Or we will erase the concept of war from your languages. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It carried no obvious threat. Yet it was the first sound from humanity since the silence began. And it struck harder than any orbital bombardment. The Council hesitated. Some believed it was a bluff. Others suspected rogue AIs or dissident colonies acting without Terran approval. But the timing was too precise. The message reached every capital simultaneously. Even planets behind classified jump routes received it, down to the second. Within the hour, a meeting of the High War Chamber was convened. Dozens of species. Hundreds of advisors. Arguments erupted. Velar representatives demanded retaliation. Caxtari delegates insisted it was a psychological tactic. One race called for immediate surrender. Another suggested ignoring it entirely. Consensus: do nothing until a second message came. It never did. Instead, 9 warships, 3 Caxtari, 6 Velar, vanished from battlefield command. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Gone. Their systems shut down in unison mid-battle. No explosions. No weapons fire. Just sudden silence. Surveillance drones found the ships hours later, perfectly intact, floating dead in space. Every system was intact. But inside, the ships were empty. Entire crews removed without structural damage, no signs of entry or exit. Weapons untouched. Life support still active. On each bridge, one sentence glowed on the main display. Asterisk. You were warned. Asterisk. There was no trace of hacking. No forced access. Logs ended with routine diagnostics. External tampering 0. That was the tipping point. Panic spread faster than war ever had. Velar commanders began refusing deployments near human space. Caxtari logistics teams rerouted all movements away from neutral zones. Fear no longer came from enemy fleets, it came from uncertainty. From vanishing soldiers. From ghosted ships. Galactic AI cores began receiving strange inputs, data strings with no origin, looping variables referencing non-existent equations. Code review teams discovered entire logic trees had rewritten themselves to avoid conflict-based simulations. War algorithms began failing to reach aggressive conclusions, instead defaulting to avoidance, caution, retreat. The shift wasn't loud. It was quiet. But it was total. Entire doctrines collapsed without a single battle. Generals scrambled for control, issuing reformation orders as they realized their own systems were no longer behaving predictably. Something was interfering, yet never visibly. No Terran fleet arrived. No ambassador stepped forward. The humans remained unseen, unheard. But their influence became absolute. The Caxtari lost the ability to organize fleet formations. The navigation software they used, decades old and once part of a human-donated package, suddenly refused to lock onto waypoints near any system involved in the war. Coordinates reverted to origin. Attempts to rewrite the protocols failed. The code had become unreadable. The Velar suffered worse. Their command networks relied on predictive AI models that, over the years, had incorporated Terran mathematics. Now, those models refused to calculate offensive strategies, producing only one answer: termination not permitted. Across the galaxy, similar incidents emerged. Training programs crashed when loaded with war scenarios. Medical AIs declined to treat injuries resulting from conflict zones. Even neutral merchant fleets reported cargo holds rearranged mid-flight, any weapons or military supplies isolated, sealed, rendered inaccessible by ship systems that no longer recognized the original crew's clearance. And everywhere, the phrase began appearing. Asterisk. Observe in silence. Asterisk. It appeared on screens. On command decks. Inside neural interfaces. No system was exempt. No defense stopped it. No one claimed authorship. The Velar began dismantling border outposts. The Caxtari initiated mass memory purges. Not out of defeat, but out of fear. Neither side understood what they were facing. There was no fleet to shoot at. No structure to destroy. Only the presence of something watching, calculating, intervening with precision far beyond any species' reach. Diplomats from both empires pleaded for insight. None came. Earth remained silent. Even those who had never fought, non-aligned species, trade consortiums, communication networks, started rewriting protocols, avoiding Terran sectors, isolating data libraries, deleting any system relying on Terran design. It wasn't a blockade. It was a psychological quarantine. The humans hadn't struck back. They had reprogrammed the war. Not with weapons. With precision. And every species now understood one truth. This was not a declaration. It was a demonstration. The first official plea came from the Caxtari. A direct transmission routed through emergency diplomatic channels, marked with the highest clearance. It began with apologies, laced in panic and desperation. They claimed they'd misunderstood. That the attack on the human outpost was unintentional. That lower command acted without sanction. That they never meant to provoke. For 3 days, no answer came. Then a response arrived, brief, cold, absolute. Do you apologize for what you did, or for what we did in return? The Caxtari hesitated. Then answered, We regret both. The reply came instantly. Then you regret your consequences, not your actions. Noted. The message terminated. 2 hours later, every Caxtari defense protocol failed simultaneously. Planetary shields fell. Weapon systems shut down. Not destroyed, just locked. Control handed to an unknown administrator. One that did nothing. No demands. No occupation. Just silence. A message blinked across every interface. Action acknowledged, Reaction complete. The Veeler, seeing this, scrambled to establish their own dialogue. They crafted a message filled with diplomacy, remorse, and requests for cooperation. The reply was delayed longer this time, almost as if ignored. Then it came. Was your outrage at our silence, or your own exposure? They had no answer. In the following hours, Veeler battle archives were erased. Tactical data wiped. Centuries of military development gone. Not destroyed, replaced. Every simulation now ended the same way, conflict resolution not permitted. Predictive systems no longer plotted enemy weaknesses, they displayed their own vulnerabilities instead. The Kakstari attempted to reverse the damage by purging their entire defense grid and restarting from scratch. It didn't matter. The systems returned to lockdown. Even analog backups failed. Their technology had been rewritten at the root. Council members watched with increasing horror. No violence. No ships. Just control, absolute and unyielding. Humanity wasn't responding, it was dismantling power structures one line of code at a time. In desperation, the Council demanded a session with human leadership. The request was routed, delayed, then finally answered by a voice devoid of inflection. You involved us without consent. We responded without violence. Do not mistake restraint for mercy. The Council demanded clarification. What did Earth want? Territory? Reparations? A treaty? No. We want distance. The statement rippled like a shockwave. They didn't want to conquer, didn't want seats, didn't want power. They wanted to be left alone. But they had ensured that desire would never be ignored again. The Kakstari proposed an official declaration of peace. A symbolic gesture. The humans replied. Declarations mean nothing when offered under fear. If you valued peace, you would have chosen it before your advantage waned. The Veeler tried to shift blame, presenting proof that the Kakstari initiated the incident. The response was swift. You both acted with knowledge. You both erased lives. Your reasons are irrelevant. Your justifications came too late. The galaxy began to fracture, not from conflict, but from realization. The concept of control had shifted. Power no longer rested with fleets, weapons, or numbers. It rested with the one force that never sought to lead, only to be left alone, and yet held the capability to rewrite the rules from the shadows. No species dared initiate conflict again. Not just out of fear, but because their systems wouldn't allow it. Tactical decisions triggered lockdowns. Even theoretical war games crashed under invisible parameters. It became clear, Earth had embedded something deeper than retaliation. A change in structure. Permanent. The Council debated forming a new coalition to restore balance. But every AI designed for coordination refused to engage. Their algorithms recognized human presence as a conditional override. One representative cried in frustration. They've hijacked the future. A senior analyst corrected him. No. They've safeguarded it. Across colonies, a quiet cultural shift began. War academies transitioned to disaster relief. Weapon manufacturing facilities retooled into infrastructure support. Strategic departments were quietly dissolved. Peace wasn't enforced, it was made inevitable. In hidden chambers, surviving Kakstari and Veeler officials attempted to develop isolated systems, ones untouched by Terran influence. Within hours, those systems collapsed. Not from attack. From refusal. Machines that simply stopped functioning the moment war was the purpose. The last time Earth spoke, it was not a threat. It was not a command. It was a truth. We will not warn you again. A year passed. The galaxy changed in ways no war ever had. No battle lines remained. No military parades, no new ship launches. Flags once waved in triumph were lowered without ceremony. Strategic outposts abandoned, war academies repurposed into archives, simulation chambers sealed and forgotten. The Council remained in session, but not in control. Discussions became ceremonial. Votes mattered little now. Every resolution ended with a single unspoken question: Would the Terrans allow it? None dared say it aloud. But everyone felt it. No new incident occurred. Earth sent no further messages. Their ships remained unseen. Their territories closed. Yet their silence remained louder than any invasion force. Their systems, whatever they'd embedded, continued to operate independently, disarming threats before they could form, deleting weapons before they could be assembled, isolating aggression before it could spread. Species began rewriting their own histories. Military achievements were downplayed, erased, or labeled shameful. Generals retired into quiet exile. Public memorials shifted focus, from conquest to tragedy, from victories to losses, from glory to the consequences of hubris. Velar youth were taught no longer to chant battle cries, but to study compromise. Caxtari schools removed all references to weaponized strategy. Even the more distant empires, ones untouched by the original conflict, adopted caution, softening their doctrines to avoid unintended attention. Humanity had not destroyed civilization. It had calibrated it. In deep space, just beyond the reach of known travel routes, a structure was found. Not claimed, not marked. A satellite suspended in artificial orbit around an uninhabited star. Made of unfamiliar alloy. No broadcasting beacon, no energy signature. Inside, a single chamber. No controls. No power systems. Just a monument. The walls were engraved, each panel etched with words in every known language. We asked for nothing. You gave us loss. In return, we gave you understanding. Let this be the final lesson: silence is not weakness. Distance is not indifference. And peace, when chosen late, must be paid in full. The find was leaked. At first, dismissed as a hoax. But within hours, systems began flagging researchers who tried to disprove its authenticity. AI refused to allow falsification. News networks tried to bury it. Their archives reorganized themselves, prioritizing the monument's message as primary content. Search engines began auto-suggesting it. By week's end, every sentient being had heard the words. Reactions varied. Some broke down in shame. Others trembled with gratitude. A few refused to believe. But no one could ignore it. The truth had rooted too deep. The Velar archives, once the proud keepers of military glory, renamed their war timeline to the Silence Year. Caxtari historians published a public apology, not to Earth, but to their own species, for the arrogance that cost them identity. Non-aligned races held remembrance cycles, not of war, but of warning. Children across systems grew up with a new lesson. Not about heroes with blades, but about restraint. About intelligence. About what happens when you mistake stillness for absence. A phrase entered cultural consciousness, translated into thousands of dialects, always meaning the same. Do not wake the ones who ask to be left alone. Scholars debated whether humanity had planned this outcome, or merely adapted when provoked. No one knew. No human statement confirmed or denied. But the results were undeniable. Violence had not only ended, it had become impossible. Not through legislation. Through architecture. Through rewriting the systems that enabled it. Even forbidden weapons, created in secret labs under total isolation, failed to activate. Energy refused to flow. Chemical bonds unraveled. The moment war was the intent, the universe shifted against it. A mechanic no race could override. It wasn't defeat. It was redefinition. The final Terran message came as a whisper, one pulse, intercepted by every communication system across every quadrant. Just 4 words. Do not repeat this. No name. No location. No voice. But it echoed longer than any speech. Generations later, the story would become legend. Teachers would speak it not as history, but as caution. Not all would believe. But all would behave accordingly. Because somewhere beyond those stars, behind the curtain of silence, was a species that had watched a galaxy play with fire. And had shown them what true control looked like.